Lucy Zelic is continuing her fight to protect women's sport. The highly respected football journalist has taken her battle to the boss of Football Australia. She's written to James Johnson and asked why the organisation is allowing biological males to play in female divisions. She writes in her letter, over the last 2 months, frustrated players, journalists, parents and administrators have reached out to table their concerns with me. Many are too afraid to speak out. A former A-League women's footballer revealed she fears playing against a trans woman but isn't comfortable expressing her thoughts. Lucy writes, this isn't the environment our football community deserves, on or off the field. While the future of women's sport is bright, we must do everything we can to preserve this success from the elite level to the grassroots. And she also references the Flying Bats in her letter, the women's team in Sydney with 5 male-born players who have flogged a number of sides, 4-0, 5-1, 12-0, 10-0. And Lucy Zelic finishes her letter to the boss of Football Australia with this simple statement: silence is no longer an option. Will you stand up for women and girls? Lucy Zelic is live in the studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Ben. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. Any response from the boss?
Zero response. I want to preface this by saying I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, marginally, only because I sent it on Friday ahead of a long weekend, but it is now Wednesday. We're still yet to hear from them. And what I will say is the optimist in me, as I said, gives them the benefit of the doubt, but the pessimist and the realist also acknowledges that this is an organisation historically, irrespective of who's in charge, have really failed to show immense leadership when it matters and when times get tough and they have to confront difficult conversations. And this, unfortunately, is no different.
I think the only thing I've found in your letter that's untrue is the silence is no longer an option line, because that's what they've relied on now for years and years and years. I think they still think, all right, well, we've got an option here. We can just not say anything.
But it's not good enough. And what I am saying is that that's not going to fly now with a host of these parents and players, administrators, as I've said, journalists who've expressed their concerns with me multiple times over the last couple of months since I have come out and started to take this journey publicly. And they're saying, what options do we have? I want to give them an option, Ben. I want to say to them, for the concerned players, parents and administrators out there, there are options. And I want you to be able to come to me and to canvass these concerns. They don't necessarily have to be legal options. That's something they can consider down the line. But there are complaints processes that we can undertake and they can remain anonymous. And I want to be able to do that on behalf of these parents and players.
Okay, short of going to court, what can they do?
They can come to me and I can lodge a formal complaint with the Australian Human Rights Commission about this, because now what we're talking about is a breach of the Sex Discrimination Act, which was effectively developed to protect women and girls. And now it's being turned on its head and being weaponised against women and girls. And that's not good enough. And I understand very well that these parents and players are very concerned. They want to remain anonymous. We can give them those avenues. We can provide those avenues. And I'm more than happy to do the heavy lifting on their behalf, because, Ben, when parents come to me and players come to me, for example, I had a parent who I was speaking to recently that said, Lucy, I have so many concerns about this. We're considering pulling my daughter out, but unfortunately, Exactly. And that's what I'm saying to them. Don't pull them out, because you shouldn't have to be pulled out of the game. But these parents are saying, I work in corporate. We work to many, DEI policies and things like that, which if I was to come out and speak out about this publicly would render me jobless, which is disgusting.
I mean, how risky is it for James Johnson not to act on this when you consider what we've been through with the Matildas in the last 12 months and the way that they captivated the nation, and you had all of these young girls and boys, because of the Matildas, saying, righto, I'm going to go and sign up, I'm going to go and play the round ball game. And right when that's happening, to jeopardise it, I mean, that's a very risky move from James Johnson if he doesn't act.
It's a hugely risky move, right? So they're so happy to profit on all of the success that these women, by the way, underlined and in bold, women achieved, who fought for supremacy, who fought to have a right to play, who fought to have a voice, for equal pay, for sponsorships, for advertisements, for, television coverage and all of these things. These women created this success, Ben, and they're so happy to stand up and say, right, we created this Legacy 23 plan. Look at this cash injection that we're receiving from multiple government branches who are now injecting these funds into women's facilities and women's sport. We want to grow the game. We've got a 10-year business plan. We've got this equality plan. We've got all of these things that are heavily invested in driving the significant growth of women's football. But when it comes to defending women, we're going to sit down, we're going to shut up, and we're not going to open our mouths about it because we're terrified. Why are you terrified? Who are you terrified of? And if you're not acting in the best best interests of women and girls, who are not only half the electorate in this country, by the way, but who are the core constituents in these competitions, then what are you doing?
Lucy Zelic is our guest in the studio, the respected football commentator. You speak in your letter about a former A-League women's footballer. Tell us about her story and what she said to you.
So she reached out to me privately to basically thank me for speaking out on this issue publicly, and that, I quoted her in the article, you read it out earlier, where she said, I fear speaking out about these issues because I'm going to get hammered about it effectively, but please keep up this fight. Please continue this charge on behalf of us. And whilst it's so great, Ben, to receive a host of these messages, it is also frustrating because until we start to see a groundswell of support that's actually starting to breach the shadows and is coming into the public domain, unfortunately this issue will remain static and it will remain stagnant, which is why I'm saying to parents and players, please come to me. There are avenues that we can pursue to do this, and I'm happy to do this heavy lifting on your behalf, but I can't do it without your voices.
So what is this role that you're now taking on? This is an unpaid volunteer role, is it, on behalf of women's football?
It is. It is unpaid, but, you have to remember too, Ben, I didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to really take this charge on. I'm a mother of a young girl, and young girls, when it comes to this type of gender ideology, are the most susceptible to it. I want to ensure that if she goes into a sporting space, that she's going to be afforded, by virtue of her biological birthright, an opportunity to compete at a level playing field, and also to go into a dressing room and to feel comfortable. These are the conversations that these sporting administrators aren't prepared to broach, but we need to be having them because it's a slippery slope. Everyone is saying to me, oh, Lucy, it's not like the trans community are coming at a high level and high performance sport in waves. But hang on a minute, just because you can't see it, it doesn't mean that it's not occurring. What I'm arguing for is that we need protections not just in the high performance arena, but right down to the community levels. Because guess where? Every player that's gone on to represent their country has gotten their start at community level football. And what we're seeing now is increased numbers competing in teams across not just New South Wales, but right across the country.
How do we get you into a leadership position at Football Australia or get you into Parliament somewhere? That's
no,
where you belong.
thank you. No, thank you. You know why? Because the politics within politics are far too busy for me,
Right.
and I can't advocate if I'm on the inside, Ben, and that's the real issue with this.
Okay, let me ask you about this. The International Olympic Committee has now weighed in on this issue. They've released a list of words that they're encouraging the media not to use when it comes to transgender athletes. So some of the words include born male, born female, biological male, or biological female. So apparently people covering the Olympic Games are not allowed to use those words.
Ben, it's embarrassing. That's the only word that I could use to summarise that. And yesterday I posed a question about it, and I said, is the International Olympics Committee suddenly operating under a communist regime? I mean, you're basically telling journalists what to say and instructing them on what to say and what type of language to use. That is a complete contravention of the profession itself. As a journalist, our objectivity, of course, is to pursue the truth, right? And I cannot sit here and say that trans women are women. That is a lie. And for the International Olympics Committee to perpetuate this lie and to continue to go down this ideological rabbit hole is a disgrace, and they are destroying their credibility every day that they continue to pursue this.
They don't want us to say born male, born female. They don't want us to say identifies as. They don't want us to say transsexual or transgender. You can't even use the word transgender.
No, you can. And that's what I'm actually arguing for in this instance. For every journalist out there that took the oath to pursue the truth and to do what is right and just, I'm encouraging all of them to completely ignore these guidelines and to go against that, because if they do submit to that and they continue to fall down this rabbit hole and bend the knee to this gender ideology, what I will tell you is, and what I said earlier, they are in contravention of their profession. It is going against their very oath to pursue the truth.
We need more of you out there. I can't wait to see whether you get a response from James Johnson, the boss of Football Australia, but we await his reply and we'll let everyone know once you get that reply. Thank you so much for coming in the studio, and thank you so much for taking up this issue.
No, and thank you, Ben, for taking up this issue. It's really important to see men, particularly men, speaking on this. As a proud Conservative voter, I think it's important for everybody to know this really extends well beyond the political spectrum, whether you are on the left or the right, but this is something that is hugely important, and your voice is very, very much appreciated in this space.
Thank you. Lucy Zelic live in the studio. So James Johnson, the boss of Football Australia, over to you.